The unity that we are seeing at the moment is just spectacular. Transatlantic unity, European Union unity, we have a military support coming in, but there is also, if you look at the unity of the sanctions and everything, I think you can really, during the last few days, we can see how much people understand where we are.
I was the ambassador to Estonia to the UN, speaking to our friend Andrea Mitchell on the unprecedented unity as the world strikes back against Vladimir Putin's aggression in Ukraine. More than 35 countries have announced sanctions against Russia, and the impact so far has been devastating, causing Russia's currency to plummet, leading to long lines at Russian banks. The world coming together to defend Ukraine's independence is a powerful moment in a time when global democracies have been threatened by the world's autocracies. President Biden seizing the moment to highlight the importance of democracy in his State of the Union speech tomorrow. He is reworking that speech to emphasize U.S. support of Ukraine. Joining us now is Congressman Jason Crow of Colorado, a member of the Armed Services and Intelligence Committees. He led a U.S. congressional delegation to Kyiv to discuss Russia's military buildup in December. Congressman, Claire and I were talking just on a lighter note about that scene from American President where Michael J. Fox at the last minute says, I got a new speech to go write. And I said, do you think that the White House is having this, I got a new speech to go write moment? And I wonder, I don't know if they are or not, and if you do, please share. But what's your sense of what the country and the world wants to hear from the president tomorrow night?
Well, Nicole, I think there's a lot of things that have happened that people did not anticipate. We certainly didn't anticipate the ferocity of the Ukrainian resistance. We knew and have known for a long time the Ukrainians are a very proud and independent people, but their ability to withstand the onslaught that we've seen over the last 5 days is really incredible. President Zelensky has really shown himself to be an incredible combat leader and somebody that not just Ukrainians but the world can rally around. And he's made the case both publicly to the world as well as to Ukrainians for that resistance. But you also have, as you mentioned, a really unprecedented rallying of the transatlantic partnership, Europe and the United States coming together rather to push back on Russian aggression. But that's not accidental. It's not incidental. This has been deliberate. This has been a work that the Biden administration and others have laid the groundwork for over the last couple of months, and it's starting to bear some fruit.
You called Zelensky a combat leader, and I got just a physical feeling to that. His country is now putting down smartphones and their lives that they were living a week ago and building weapons in parking garages that are serving as bomb shelters. What makes someone fight?
Well, you know, Nicole, I don't know the answer to that, actually. People might think that I do. I mean, I served 3 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. And what I can tell you is you really never know how somebody's going to perform. I've seen very tough personalities, macho type of individuals who just shrink and cower and can't perform in combat. And I've seen very quiet, insular folks do remarkable things and show incredible bravery. So you really can't tell what's in the heart of a person until that moment arrives. But what we are seeing is that moment has arrived and Ukrainians have rallied. President Zelensky has rallied and they're pushing back hard. I think it's also important to say, though, that this is going to be a long fight and the odds are still stacked against them. Russia has overwhelming combat power. They are adapting, they are changing, they are learning, they're fixing their problems. So this is going to be a long haul for sure.
When you were there in December, what did they ask for? And at this point, how can we get them? They're asking for more weapons. I know President Zelensky would like the airspace closed. President Biden has said that we will not do that. But in terms of what they need and what would help, what can you tell us about that?
Well, we're not going to close the airspace. I mean, I've seen and heard these calls for enacting a no-fly zone, and let's just be really clear what that means. That means going to war with Russia. And that's not what we're going to do. We're not going to have 2 of the world's biggest nuclear powers going to war in Europe to enforce a no-fly zone. That's not a tenable option right now. So what we can do is continue to do what we have been, and that is expediting the movement of weapons, defensive equipment, communications equipment, vehicles as quickly as possible. The European Union is doing that. NATO is doing that. The United States is doing that. But we have to do it faster. And we have to make sure that we're protecting the land transit routes from Poland largely into the main cities to get them the weapons that they need to continue to resist.